November office hours from the Success Path to Peaceful Parenting. If you haven't been with us before, I'm Dr. Laura Markham, and you see Candace, who is the moderator of our Facebook group and also who is the organizer of this meeting today. So she'll be creating the list of people for me to call on and monitoring that. So Naomi, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, thanks so much. Question about empathizing during an anger kind of outburst. I'm finding my 9-year-old is just telling me to shut up, to stop talking, even though I'm trying to, kind of acknowledge, like, you're really angry right now. I hear you, I hear what you're angry about. So I'm wondering, am I not doing it empathetically or authentically enough? Or if I should just respect what he's saying and just kind of physically be there, present, and not say anything.
This is a universal question, so I'm so glad you asked it. So, and it happens even with 4-year-olds, but the older kids get, the more likely you are to have that kind of a response. So first of all, let's pull the camera back and look at your child's perspective. So he is really angry. What does that mean? It means he's in a state of fight, right? He feels a sense of threat. And the threat could be that you told him he can't have screen time or a treat or whatever, or you've asked him to do something he doesn't want to do. Could be any threat, or could be that he had a fight with someone at school today, or that his sibling bothered him. Could be anything. He doesn't like his homework. He had a fight with the teacher, or, he did something wrong in class. It could be anything. But because he's feeling that threat from the world, his body, when we feel threatened, what do? There's an alarm message that says there's a problem, We have to be ready to fight or run away or shut down. So he's ready to fight. So when the parent acknowledges you're really angry right now, it's very hard to get that exactly right. I mean, imagine you're in that state where you had a fight with your partner, or your boss has said something that seemed totally unfair to you, or your best friend or your relative did something that really upset you and crossed a boundary, and you're in a state of fight. And somebody else who's not related to this, or even somebody who did, let's say the fight was with your partner and your partner says, I see you're really angry right now, right? You would not like it if they said that, right? It wouldn't make you feel understood. So I think it's very hard to get the tone just right. But so if it's you who said you can't have a treat or whatever, and your child is mad at you, is there a way to get it right? It depends sort of on how mad they are. So let's say he's really angry, and you say, instead of saying you're really angry, I would, because often kids have been told they're not supposed to be angry, or they've somehow absorbed that. So when you say you're really angry, they feel like you're criticizing them, and that just adds fuel to the fire. So it helps to not use the word anger. It helps to say, I see that really upsets you. And then to acknowledge what they're upset about. You really wish I would say you could have more screen time, whatever. So you're acknowledging what upsets them as opposed to labeling the anger, right? We all think we're supposed to label the emotion, but that's not that useful in many cases. It's useful if the child does it. If the child is able to say, I'm angry, that's actually helpful, so that they can see their calming, that they can, okay, I'm feeling anger. Anger is washing through me, but I don't have to get hijacked. That's a very sophisticated level of experience. But right now, when you're saying, you really wish I would let you do that. I hear you. Shut up. I can just see that's what he would say. Shut up. And then I say, you be quiet. Later, you say to him, you don't need to tell me to shut up. That tone of voice is not okay. I don't use that tone of voice with you. You don't need to use words like shut up. You can say, stop talking, and I will hear it and I will stop, right? Because we're just going to, if we keep doing what they're asking us not to, they're going to escalate and use worse, more rudeness, which we're just setting it up, right? We don't want to, but that's what we're inadvertently doing. So our job at that point is to close our mouths, but be present. When someone's upset, like let's say you came home and you were super upset and you were talking to your best friend or your partner who hadn't been involved in something, and you were really angry. If they just kept repeating, I see this really makes you angry, you would not feel understood. But if they said, oh my goodness, oh really? Oh, what happened then? Oh no. Right. And that's even too many words. But if they did occasionally throw something in, but mostly they just sat there and they said, wow, oh my goodness. Oh, I'm so sorry. Just every so often. And when you recounted it, you would feel understood. Notice they haven't said, I see you're very angry. Right. So I think that's when someone's upset, the way we want to be with them is to acknowledge their experience. And if it's our child, it's our job to restore safety. Because remember, they're in a fight response, right? Even if it's your partner, you would want to restore safety, right? You don't want them to feel like they're about to get attacked, which just heightens the problem. So for anyone who's upset, really, we want to restore safety. Later, after the child is upset, we can say, you were so disappointed when I wouldn't let you XYZ, or when I asked you to XYZ. I'm so sorry. I know it was hard for you. And then you might even give them a stroke about it. You might say, I saw you were able to pull it together and recover after only a few minutes. I was really proud of you. I know that wasn't easy. And then you might add, and you don't need to ever say, shut up to me. I will always take a breath and just listen if that's what you need me to do. Is that helpful?
That's super helpful. And I saw some pop-ups that, the next part of that is, and if they tell you to go away, even if you're just sitting there quietly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is, and you got to restore safety. There's other children involved. There's potentially, belongings involved that might get thrown.
Absolutely. And you don't want to provocatively add fuel to the fire again. So when they say, so first of all, I would have the discussion while they're not angry. If this is who habitually tells you to go away, there's something going on there that they need you to listen to. I would have the discussion and say, when you get really mad, I try to be present because those are overwhelming feelings and I don't want you to feel alone with them. But often you yell at me to go away. Do you really want me to go away at those times? I've heard a range of responses when I've suggested parents do this. Sometimes the child will say, yes, I want you to go away. Sometimes the child will say, not really, but I don't like it when you look at me. It makes me feel too conscious. So stay nearby in case I need you, so I know you're listening, but don't look at me, right? So there's a whole range of responses, and kids usually know what they need. So let's say your 10-year-old says, yes, go away. It might be an indicator that they don't feel safe because in the past, they have been made to maybe they have somehow imbibed from the environment that it's not okay to get angry, for instance, or upset. Or they just don't feel as close to you. I'm thinking of one mom I work with who, her 12-year-old wouldn't want her to be around when she was upset because she felt like the other child was preferred, the younger daughter. But as the mom really worked with her on connection, her child she would still not want her to be there when she was upset, but later she started really opening up. She would come into her mom's room at bedtime and say, you know why I was so upset today? Because of this and that and the other thing. And then she would even start to cry. And so she was opening up about what had led to the anger, which is exactly what we want for them, not to just stuff it, but to actually have a witness who can help them through those feelings, help them feel safe. Because if they just stuff it, it'll come out again tomorrow, right? That's why we stay nearby. You don't stay nearby because I told you to. You stay nearby because the goal is that it would help them with the emotions. But if it just makes them escalate, that's not helping anything, right? So if they're saying go away, go away, go away, you go away and you say, I'm right here if you need me, right? And then later you bring it up and talk about it and ask about it. And often if there's enough safety by then and they don't feel blamed or shamed about their anger, often they will start to move toward the feelings that are behind the anger. Now, anger is a valid emotion by itself. I want to be really clear about that because in one of our office hours, someone said to me, well, you always say it's secondary. It is secondary. It's fight, flight, or freeze, right? It's secondary to feeling threatened, but it's still a valid emotion. When somebody crosses a boundary, a robber holds me up at gunpoint, that's crossing a boundary. And I'm afraid, but I'm also legitimately angry. But to work out the anger, I need to go to that feeling underneath it of violation and fear and vulnerability and powerlessness. Once I've worked through those things, I don't need to be in fight, flight, or freeze anymore, and the anger will melt away. So that's what we're trying to give our children. we're always trying to help our children to feel safe so they can go to those more vulnerable feelings. And at that point, then they don't need to be in anger anymore. But you don't have to do it at that moment. You can do it later. And if your child doesn't want to do it later, that's a sign to increase connection in other ways so that they are more willing to do it with you later. Okay, I hope that helps. And Candace, I see we have lots of work going on in the chat, which is wonderful. And I am just seeing here.
Shamama.
Okay, Shamama, if you could please unmute yourself.
Sorry. Hello. Hi, Dr. Laura.
Hello.
Thank you for this. I'm really glad I'm able to ask a question today. So my question is basically, I have a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I started peaceful parenting with my 10-year-old when he was 6, right? So it was going well till the pandemic started, and like about 6 months into the pandemic, it kind of went a bit downhill, and it was getting a bit frustrating because we were all at home working from and all of that. So my question basically is that my son likes to be babied a lot, right? So he's always asking me to baby him, and he's like, that's my husband. So he's like, I'm a baby. He becomes a baby seal sometimes. He's a baby cat sometimes, and he's like always babying me, carry me. And he's like 10 years old, right? So he's nearly my height. So over this much. So it's very hard for me now to do that with him. And the other thing I wanted to ask was, it's very hard for me to give attention to both of them because they have a bit of a gap in between them, right? So they have conflicting needs and they both want my attention at the same time. And especially when I'm sitting with one of them, the other one wants attention, right? So if I'm doing homework with my 10-year-old, the 4-year-old will come over and like, oh no, can you play with me right then at that time because I'm with the older boy, right? So yeah, basically that's what I want to ask.
So first of all, the pandemic, lots of kids had the experience of parents being overextended and trying to work at home. So they were home doing schoolwork and the parents, they never got a break. And also if the parents were trying to help other kids with schoolwork, and also if the parents were trying to do any other work, then they were, often saying to the kid, no, I'm in a meeting, leave me alone. And the kids felt rejected, right? Yeah. So lots of kids' response to the pandemic was very negative, to say the least, right? Where they felt unloved. And it wasn't, parents didn't love them or didn't want to give them attention. It was just, what could the parent do? They have all this other, other children and work going on. So that happens with a lot of kids. And the cure for feeling rejected is to feel embraced, right? To feel like, there was this situation that happened and sometimes they had this experience. So we say to them, when you were doing homeschooling, when you were doing remote school learning, and I told you I was in a meeting, that must have been hard for you. Or when I was helping your brother, that must have been hard for you or whatever. And often kids will say, yeah, why did you do that? And, that's their anger from that time surfacing. And what's under that anger is that feeling like, for some reason that I didn't understand, just when I needed my parent most, because I couldn't go to school. I didn't, I was bored. I was cooped up. I was worried. I was doing this remote schooling, which felt awfully remote and difficult. Here was my parent rejecting me, right? So a lot of kids need to get that addressed. So I don't know if that's true for your son, but it sounds like it might be, since you say he was fine until the pandemic. So I'd say that's I say the full backpack, that's he's been carrying around this fear that he's not loved as much as he was. And kids who need to be babied, that's often an expression of that exact issue. Either another sibling came along and they want to make sure they're still the baby too, or in some way, right? Sometimes we put pressure on them. Sometimes we're like, you can do that yourself. You're big enough to do that, right? And, all of us have felt like saying that. My hands are busy with your brother. You can put that jacket on yourself. And he's like, no, I can't. I need your help, right? And so, right, I think it's important that we recognize that sometimes it scares us when kids do that. It doesn't mean they're going to be dependent on us forever. Believe me, by the time he's 12, he won't want to even admit he has a mother because that would imply that he has needs, right? He wouldn't want anyone to know he has any dependency needs, right? So,
Yeah.
it's fine to baby them, especially during special time. And now here's your part of your question that's about when both kids need you at once. So you're going to have to help the 10-year-old with his homework. So the little one, so you say to the 10-year-old, here's the thing, I'm going to spend some time with your brother so that he can then do something and not bother us while we're doing your homework. So I'm going to spend some special time with him, but you and I are going to have special time whenever, maybe before homework too, right? So he has to know that's the trade-off, but he should be able to delay that gratification and wait if he knows he's going to get it. And you could even say, whoever gets special time first gets 20 minutes. Whoever gets 15 minutes. Whoever gets it second gets 20 minutes. You can, I don't know, if a 6-year-old is quite old enough to understand that though, right? To make that choice.
Yeah.
The special time first. But after special time, so first of all, you have to find something that 10-year-old wants to. It's 10 and 6. Did I get the age?
10-year-old and 4-year-old girl.
Sorry, 10 and 4. 10 and 4. So the 4-year-old definitely needs it first. He's not 6. Sorry. So he needs it first, no matter what. So you have to get the 10-year-old busy doing something he enjoys, preferably something with headphones, so he doesn't hear you laughing with his little brother.
Yeah.
Right. I love noise canceling headphones for this reason. Then he can be listening to a book on tape or an audiobook, something, and you can play with a 4-year-old. Then you have to get the 4-year-old busy doing something, either an audiobook with headphones or something else he likes that he only gets to play with while you do special time with his brother, something that he can focus on so he's not interrupting you. And I would do special time with both of them and then do homework, because homework is asking a lot of kids. They do school all day and then they do homework. It's just so much to ask of them. So to do special time first really help, or laughter, any kind of roughhousing. If you can't get the 4-year-old to leave you alone for special time with the 10-year-old, even after he's had his own special time, you could do roughhousing with both of them a little bit. And then you can get the 4-year-old busy doing something while you do homework with the older one, because 4-year-old can only be occupied for so long, right? So it may be that you can't do special time until then he goes to bed earlier than the 10-year-old, obviously, and then you get with the 10-year-old.
Right. Yeah. I think that's what it is. Doing the special time with the 4-year-old so they're satisfied before going on to something like a homework activity. Yeah, that's right.
All right.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay. And our next person is Danielle. If you could unmute yourself, please. Hi, Danielle.
Hi there. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. So my question, it's interesting because I just started doing this probably 8 months ago. And I have a 9 and 11-year-old. And my husband, it's a 9-year-old boy and an 11-year-old girl. And my husband is an incredible partner and is completely, wants to do this and understands it and gets it. But he's also very reactive. And what ended up happening a lot lately is I'll hear him say something that I know will trigger one of the kids, and I intervene, and me intervening triggers him, and then the children see it. And then, so it was interesting because we had a bit of a blow up over the weekend where I wasn't even in the room, but I came upstairs because I heard, what was going on. And then me just being there, got my husband, he reacted, and then whatever. So then later on, after they all had worked it out, my son said to me, Mom, it really bothers me when you get involved because it seems to, make everything worse. And then of course I, felt bad. And then on the flip side of that is sometimes when I'll if the two of them, my 2 children are going into it or something happens, and I'll acknowledge, first start with connection and empathy and acknowledge how the person who may have done the thing was feeling. Like my older daughter, who's incredibly articulate and very verbal, will say, oh, so you're just taking his side. By me just acknowledging, kind of how he was feeling before I get into that, correction or whatever later after the empathy. So I guess my question is, what is it that I should do when I hear, and I don't really want to be around for, it'll happen at bedtime, it'll happen at dinner, or my husband will say something that I know isn't very helpful or will cause, one of the kids to go off. What is it that I can say that won't trigger him, but yet I'm not willing to let it keep going to escalate? And then what is it, that thing I say when my daughter says, oh, you're taking their side by acknowledging, how somebody feels?
Okay, we have two different questions here,
Oh, sorry.
which are important. That's okay. So first of all, have you listened to the short course, audio course that's a bonus in the Peaceful Parent Happy Kids course about couples? You've listened to that?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things so anybody who hasn't listened to it and has a question about this should know that that exists. I don't remember which week it's in, maybe 5. So that's an important resource for people. And basically, what I would say to your specific question is, you want to have the conversation right now when no one's dysregulated, nothing is happening with your partner about what happens when you come into the room. Because it sounds like your partner is trying to handle things, is not handling things in a way that you would, and you come in and your partner feels criticized and blamed and shamed, and therefore gets more dysregulated, and then everything blows up to the point where it's worse. And where even your 9-year-old is saying to you, Mom, don't come in, right? We'd rather have Dad say stuff to us that we don't like than have you come in, and then we feel responsible for a fight between our parents, right? That's what's happening. So if you have the conversation with your partner and say, and you're not blaming, but you're saying, there are times when I'm in over my head with the kids, and I end up saying things that you probably don't think are such a great idea, or I'm losing it, or I'm frustrated, or I'm impatient. That must happen. You must think sometimes that I'm not handling things well. And I'm sure your partner will say, yes, that's right.
He actually wouldn't.
He wouldn't. He would say, no, you're actually, Danielle, you've got it covered. I'm amazed and in awe of your ability to pull this off.
I know it sounds silly, but yes, because I'm quite good at this is not an emergency, and I don't react. So if the kid says something, really, disrespectful or whatever, I don't even engage in it. And that further, annoys him, because he's like, you're just going to let, and he gets it all. He's not in any way, he knows whatever he's saying later on, when we've talked about it privately, he gets that it was not the right thing to say. And he's never saying that I am incorrect in what I'm saying. He just can't hear it while yes. And so I don't know how to.
They can't. You remember, when people go into fight mode, the other person is the enemy, right? That they're not hearing or seeing the other person's perspective. They're not reasonable. We know everything that's not necessary for fight goes offline, right? The immune system stops working, digestion stops what it's doing. We can't learn, and the prefrontal cortex, the actual thinking part of the brain, stops working. So right. We know that's what happens. So that's great, by the way, that you're able to self-regulate to the point where he doesn't see anything you could do better.
That's with him, though. I can't do it with him. As soon as he does something, I get completely triggered, and I'm like,
bingo. That's such a great insight. Such a great insight that you know that, because that's the work that needs to happen. So I would say, first of all, you've got some work to do with him. And then secondly, you have some work to do inside you. So I would suggest the work inside you to do some journaling work. And I would ask yourself some questions. What is it that pushes your buttons so much about him doing what he's doing with the kids? And when you intervene with an attitude that is, if it were your children doing this, you would intervene hopefully with a positive, empathic attitude to both your kids. We'll talk about your daughter's comment in a second, but hopefully you're having an empathic attitude toward both children. So when you're intervening with your husband, if indeed you're doing that, you need to start with an empathic attitude toward him rather than a judgmental one. So what keeps you from being judgmental? What could you say to yourself in those at those times to not be judgmental? And how bad would it be to just sit it out if in fact you can't self-regulate before you go in? With your children, you wouldn't do that. You know, if your 9 and 11-year-old were, you know, fighting in a dramatic way, you wouldn't just sit that out. You would go move in and try to regulate as you did it. But with your partner, even if he's saying, I've told you before, and I'm going to tell you right now, and if you keep doing this, there will be no more that, you know, threats. Let's just assume he's threatening or something that you wouldn't do. It'd be great if you could self-regulate before you go in. But if you can't self-regulate before you go in, and you go in and you're livid at him and the children can see that, it's not worth it. As your son has already told you, it makes things worse. It doesn't help. So in that case, it's probably worth sitting it out. But I would do some journaling about all that. You could even have one session with a coach if it would help you to work through this one issue. And then when you do talk to your partner, you say, you know, I'm trying to be really not judgmental when I come in. But sometimes, and you know, you and I both know that threats and whatever are not the way to handle the kids and raising our voices. But obviously, when you get upset, sometimes you do that. And I totally understand why. What would be helpful for me to do in intervening? And he might say nothing, stay out of it. Or he might say, well, you could just not have an attitude when you come in. You could actually try to help instead of judging me. You know, it'd be interesting to see what he would say. But one way to handle it, once you could say to him, how about if I did this? How about if I came in and said, wow, I'm hearing a lot of loud voices here. It sounds to me like your dad feels really strongly about this. You're talking to the kids. Your dad feels really strongly about this. Once we all come down, we can talk about it. But right now, I think you guys need to be listening to your dad. He's asked you twice to do this thing and you need to do it. You could do that. That's not disrespectful to your kids. You're being clear. You're going to talk about it later. You're acknowledging that it's important to him. Now, some people might still, because they're in fight mode, right? They might still feel like you're disrespecting me. You're coming in and taking over. They might. That's why you have the conversation with him in advance. But to me, once you've had that conversation and he's giving you permission to do that, you can do it because you're coming in and you're acknowledging his position first thing, right? But you're not doing it to him. You're not coming and saying, wow, you seem really upset about this, honey, you know, because that would not work. You're coming and saying to the kids, it sounds like your dad feels really strongly about this. You really do need to do the cleanup in here, as he's asked you 3 times now. Let's get on this. We're going to talk about it once everybody calms down. I know that we say in this house, we speak respectfully to each other and your dad's voice is really loud. That's how upset he is. Let's get this cleaned up and then we'll talk about it once we all calm down. Does that help with that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not usually something it's usually, he'll say something a little bit, he has a tendency, and he knows this and it triggers me, where he'll be like, stop, or don't, no, like, you know, with either to me or to the kids. And it causes all of us to then, you know, it escalates it rather than de-escalates it. So it's not so much an action of like, go clean up, but then the child gets upset and then they start fighting, and then, you know, he feels like they're not speaking nicely to him, and then they feel like he's just, you know, yelling at them. But I'm also trying to figure out what's the thing I do when you say sit it out, which is fine, but like, do I also sit it out if they were sitting at the dinner table and he says something kind of a little bit negative about?
I think before he's super dysregulated, when he's just a little bit negative, you could have a little signal. You could say to him, when we're sitting at the dinner table and I see something that could go south on us, I wonder if we could have some kind of a signal between us. Like if he said, what's an example of what he could say?
Stop playing with your food. You haven't eaten enough. You know, whatever.
So
sit upright, eat with your, you know.
Yep. Okay. And in that case, you could say to him, when this happens at the table and the kids are doing whatever you don't like and they're playing with their food and not sitting up straight and whatever, and you say that, what would be the best way for us to intervene? So you as a couple work out what you agree is the best way to intervene. Now, he may forget in the moment to do that, but he'll remember then if you say, when he says it, when he jumps in and says it, you can say, you can look at him and smile. I know you'll be triggered. So you're going to have to take it. This is your chance to take your work. You've already done a really good job. Now you got to take it to the next level, right? And you look at him and you smile, you take your deep breaths and you turn to your child and you say, Dad's worried that you're going to be hungry later if you haven't eaten. And now you seem to not really be paying attention to your food, right? It's not so much you haven't eaten enough. It's more our concern that they'll be hungry later, right? That is, we don't, it's not our job to tell our kids how much to eat ever, because their bodies tell them. We don't want to remove that signal from them. But it is our job to say, wonder if you got distracted and forgot to eat and you'll be hungry later. That's fine for us to say. So you can just intervene at that point with that, as long as you've looked at your husband and smiled first. And he's like, all right, yeah, got it. So all of these things take a lot of conversation, but that's what a partnership is. And he sounds like a good guy. He sounds like he's open to these discussions. Yeah. So I think having these discussions separately, and then as they play out, you're being as calm as possible, which is the inner work for you, is really important. Last thing real quick, because we'll move on to someone else's question. Your daughter, when kids are fighting, you come in, your job is never to take sides. Your job is always to empathize with both kids, because they both have a perspective and they both think they're right. And so you come in and you go, wow, you two are having a hard time. I hear some loud voices. Let's take a breath. Let me see if I've got this. Now, maybe they've blurted out, or you've even said, okay, I want to hear from each of you. But regardless, you've heard their side, you see what's happening. And you say, okay, well, and you're touching both of them. I've got my hands going because I'm like pretending I'm touching both of them. So you say, okay, let me see if I've got this. And then you even say, to your son, first you, and then you say to your daughter. So she knows she's about to go next. And you say, okay, so it sounds to me, and you're talking to your son, like XYZ, like you feel like blah, 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 blah. And you don't even, it's great if you had kids who are less, or it's great if they're so regulated at that moment, you could say, did I get that right? And he can repeat it back to you and all that, but you don't have time for that because the other kid hasn't felt heard yet. So you're going to go, and you say, so I think I got that right. I'll be right back to you. And then you turn to her and you still got your hand on him, and you say, and you got your hand on her now, okay, and it sounds to me like you felt blah, 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 blah. Now, both of them are going to have to tell you that you're not completely correct in this. They have more things they want to say. And at that point, you might say, like, yeah, that's right, but also blah, blah. And you say, wait a second. Sounds like you have something very important to tell your brother. You went first last time, you're saying to your son. And so you go first now. You tell your brother what you need to tell him. But remember, you can express what you need or want from your brother without attacking him. And it will be your turn next. So you're moderating this panel so it doesn't come to fisticuffs, but you're trying actually to get them to talk to each other. And you're making sure that each of them knows they're going to have a chance. So your daughter should never be saying, yeah, you're just going to listen to him and see it from his perspective. You're like, I've just repeated both of your perspectives. I see it from both perspectives. If you think someone's wrong,
it's not so much the wrong, it's just by acknowledging, oh, so you got upset when your sister didn't offer you the candy or whatever. She'll literally, as I'm just reiterating whatever they said, oh, you're taking his side.
That's why you forestall that by saying, so so let me see if I've got this right. First you, and then you. And then you're looking, and either the kid is saying something and you're repeating it, or you're just observing what happened, right, without judgment or blame. And then you're doing it with each. But you have to just tell each of them that that's what you're doing as you're still touching her through the whole thing. And if she says that to you, oh, you're just taking his side, you've just said this to him, and you look, you're still touching him, and you sort of you're making eye contact anyway. He feels connected. You turn to her and say, yes, I'm understanding his point of view, and I'm going to understand yours in just 1 second. Hang on. And you go back to finish him so he feels heard, right? She shouldn't be able to interrupt the proceedings and shift your focus to her just because she's dysregulated and impatient at the moment.
Totally get it. And I'm not moving. You can move on because I know I'm at the end, but I just want to say, I find the hardest thing, and maybe other people feel the same way, is being able to have them articulate what they need without attacking the other person, especially if I haven't modeled it. I don't like, it just becomes, I'm not saying this is a question and you can move on. I'm just saying, I find that to be such a struggle of like them having the ability to not call the other person, a name or something without.
A big struggle. But what not only have I observed this from the many parents I've talked to about it, but I have seen the research that seems to indicate that within a few months, kids have totally learned to talk to each other in the way that you're modeling doing this. Even little kids, even 4-year-olds, you'll start to hear them from the other room saying, you know, wait a minute, I don't like it when you call me names. Stop calling me names, please, or whatever. Because you've reinforced the house rules and you've listened and they've learned how to talk to each other and express these things. But it can take some time to do. And also, you know, an 11-year-old is more ingrained in her habits than a 4-year-old. In a way, even though she has more prefrontal cortex and more ability to self-regulate, you know, the 4-year-old is more open to change. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So did Candace, did I miss our next person's name here?
Sarah.
Sarah. Okay, Sarah, could you please unmute yourself?
Hi.
Sarah.
Hi. So this office hours is perfect timing for me. This is a question regarding my 8.5-year-old daughter. She's in 3rd grade. I had talked to you on an office hours, I don't know, almost probably a year ago about her pulling her eyelashes. So that's just kind of some background if you remember. So this is regarding her wearing underwear.
Okay.
And so right before the pandemic, and I guess the reason why the question is kind of timely right now is that we live in Florida. And so I've got her into recently, and it's been like a blessing. These, like, you know, those running shorts that kind of have the built-in underwear brief. So that has been like a savior for us. And so shorts are like no problem anymore because she wears those. But we're about to travel for Thanksgiving to a cold climate. And then in Florida here, it's going to start getting kind of chilly. And, you know, as winter progresses, and maybe she needs to wear like pants to school. And so her pant of choice, like the only pant we've ever been able to really get her in are those just kind of standard leggings, that the girls' leggings. So, right, and then some kind of just general background is right when the pandemic was starting, she grew out of her underwear, like her current ones that she had been wearing the whole time, and they didn't come past a size 8, you know, so 8 was just like it for that style underwear. And I've done everything in terms of taking her to Target, you know, like letting her pick out the underwear, presenting her with like many options of different texture, different, you know, like, you know, brief versus bikini versus boy short, you know, like everything. Still no, she finds them uncomfortable. So so the whole pandemic, basically we were home. I just let her wear leggings because that was when she had grown out of the other ones, and it was always just such a struggle. And then in January of last year, she went back to school, and I listened to an office hours, and I want to say who I think you spoke with, but it wasn't related to getting your kid to wear underwear, but it was something about, you know, that was analogous. And I used that approach because she was going back to school, and I did get her to wear, and I kind of forget what the approach was, but I did get her to wear them. But then it's like the second she gets home, you know, basically I had a rule, anytime you go out of the house, you have to wear them. And it would be like the second she get home, like in the car, taking them off. I mean, it was just clear that it was like a problem for her. So the other day I mentioned to her, okay, we're going up north, you know, you're going to have to wear long pants and you're going to need to wear underwear. And I mean, it was like we were like headed out to school, and it was like, you could already see the distress on her face. And then I just kind of dropped it. And then I saw that you had office hours, and I'm like, I'm going to wait and see what Dr. Markham recommends. So I guess the question is, do I push it, like, you know, continue with trying to get her into underwear, or do I just like relax the expectation? And like, how important is it really for her to be wearing underwear, you know, like in the grand scheme of things? So any kind of thoughts you have or advice on what I should be doing?
So it's a great question, because there's an assumption in our culture you wear underwear.
Yeah.
And as you get older, it's actually a really good idea because there's discharge or whatever. But at her age, is it really so important if she has clean leggings every day? I mean, there could be seams that could be a problem, you know what I'm saying, on the leggings, but I assume if the leggings are comfortable.
She prefers it, like in the house, like at night she wears those leggings. I mean, she's like comfortable, like
Right.
that's her, that she likes that.
And clearly the fact that she's like, when she gets in the car, she has to take them off. It sounds like they're uncomfortable, right? It could be psychological, right? Like, you know, I'm so glad I get to take these off, but I think it's probably not just psychological. It's sort of like me with, if I ever wear high heels, you know, I used to, in fact, you know, back many years ago when I would come home to my apartment, I would get out of the elevator with my heels and my pantyhose on. And if nobody's around in the elevator, there were no cameras in those days, I'd be peeling off the pantyhose in the elevator. That's how much they bothered me, right? So I'm just saying, you know, it's conceivable that it really bothers her and she's got to peel those things off right away. And, you know, that making her wear them all the time, even during the travel, might be too much. So I'm not sure that you need to make a big deal of it for now, but I do think that she's probably going to, you know, she's going to start dressing for gym. She's going to, in school, have to dress for her gym class, probably. And she'll need underwear for that. No, they don't do that?
Well, no, that would be, if anything, I remember for me, because I grew up in the same area, it was like middle school was the beginning of
So
that. She's in
I don't
third grade now.
Right. She's only in third grade. So that's some years away. And a lot of things could change between now and then. How is she picking out her eyebrows?
It was eyelashes primarily. Well, when I had asked the last question, it was more about like me accepting it because I was having such a hard time. I think I'm better. I'm still not perfect, but there's been improvement. And she's cyclical. So actually right now, her eyelashes for her look fairly good. But I still see her kind of, you know, it's not over, but I see she's in like a good spiral. Something recently that I did that she was open to, which I was surprised, but I was very calm about introducing it, was this idea of castor oil. I've kind of read about it. And so basically I'll put it on her and then just kind of on her lid, not really on her lashes. I don't really want it to get in her eye, but like my primary purpose is it makes it kind of slippery and then she can't really pull as well. But then I kind of introduced it to her as a soothing concept. And then, but I did have her read the bottle without really putting attention to it, where it talked about like growth and, and so I think potentially she, and I was kind of hands off, not really like pushing it. And now she like is wanting it, you know, so, and wanting it before school. So anyway, I think that's good.
I think there's no reason that you need to have a big fight about this now. I think
About the underwear.
I think your big focus has got to be on giving her tools to manage her anxiety and her sensory issues. She's got both. So, you know, she was born with some challenges that she needs to manage to feel comfortable in the world, right? And so you can help her see that as a superpower. She's super sensitive. She's got antenna like nobody else, right? That's great. And she does have to learn how to manage things so that, you know, she's not getting teased at school or whatever, right? But no one is seen. I mean, no one is in the stall with her when she pulls down her pants. No one is, you know, if her shorts are fine, that's covered, right? So there's not really a problem. And even, you know, at Thanksgiving dinner with grandma or whatever, it's not a problem. No one's looking under her leggings. No one's knows. So yeah. I would leave it alone, but I would really focus on ways for her to feel comfortable in her body and comfortable in the world, and to notice the times when she's not comfortable and to ask herself what she needs to feel comfortable. And, you know, sometimes it won't be something socially acceptable, what she needs, but often it will be, and she can do what she needs. And the more comfortable and safe she feels, the more she'll be able to not, you know, like for instance, she probably by then would be able to wear underwear by the time she's 10 or 11. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm hoping that this is like a season, you know, and not a forever. And I'm trying not to get in that spiral of like, oh, well, is she going to be wanting to not wear them in middle school? And then, you know, so yeah, I think it's just societal kind of like, and then just general hygiene that I'm kind of like, you know, she should be in underwear, you know.
Wash them every day, who cares, right? And I also think, you you don't just sit around for the next, I said, by the time she's 10, probably, you don't just sit around for the next 2 years. You help her deal with both the anxiety and the sensory issues, right? Because both of them, what happens is when we feel anxiety is just fear, right? It's something in our nervous system that tells us we're not actually safe in the world. And the anxiety, we develop habits like pulling out our eyelashes to respond to that. And the same thing about sensory issues. If you're not comfortable because something's bothering you, and it's like, doesn't feel good, and that feels like a threat, it's the same thing. It's sort of your nervous system is saying there's something wrong. I can't feel comfortable in my body.
Yeah, it like narrows her window of tolerance, and we need to expand it. So
Which is why people take their kids to an OT to do sensory stuff. It really helps rewire. I mean, she's already 8, but they could, I think, it's possible, especially if she has any other sensory things, which I bet she does.
Clothes. And that's the one I feel like we've done, it's like no stone unturned. And I feel like we've done a lot of the different stones. And the one stone that we have not done is OT.
Okay. I wouldn't wait. I would do it because, the earlier you do OT, the better, because it's about rewiring the brain. So, I'm not saying it's too late. I'm saying start now, don't wait. Yeah.
Okay.
And even, I think they could probably help. And I think it might help in other ways that you don't even foresee. And if it doesn't,
I think I'm like, well, what could the OT do with like because I'm thinking of this, like what could they do that we're not doing, like in terms of introducing like other like fidget toys and then just the general like calming of the nervous system. We're getting educated about that, but maybe there's more like how you just said in ways I wouldn't imagine. So maybe that's the thing we gotta move forward with.
I think try it and see what happens.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, this was timely. I appreciate your blessing to just not push this for now. Put it in the background for another day, another time. Okay.
Don't worry, it won't go away. You'll have other opportunities, and hopefully she'll be more grounded in her body by the time you do that. Right? Okay. Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
I think there's some good stuff that showed up in the chat about this, so take a look at that.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Candace, who's next?
Pardon me. Next is, I wrote it and I've lost it. It's either Leslie. Does that sound correct?
I see it.
Rocio. Sorry.
Rocio, Leslie, and Pata in that order. Okay. I think it's pronounced Rocio.
Hi. My name is Rocio. You can call me whatever. I'm really happy.
Rocio? Did you say Rocio?
I'm calling from Madrid, so it's far away from you, but I'm really happy to see you. It's like I'm excited because I've read all of your books. I've been in Success Path for a long time. I've been in your page for so much time, so it's like I'm nervous to be able to talk to you. And my birthday is tomorrow, and I couldn't believe a better way to celebrate it. So I'm really happy. Thank you for the call. So yes, I think that happened today. That happens quite oftenly. I have a young kid. He's 3 now, and I have twins of 8. And the young,
you have a 3-year-old, and you also have
that have 8. That are 8 years old, yeah. And the younger one is screaming a lot. He screams, he shouts. I've been hearing all your office hours. You've talked about it several times, but I find it difficult because my other siblings never shouted. I think he needs to be he needs everyone to look at him, and he needs lots of presence of myself, no? So today, for example, we were going to start lunch and he wanted to play with the ball, and I said, there's no playing here. No, we're having lunch now. And he got the ball again, and it was like very firm, but very calm, no? We can't get the ball now, it's lunchtime. And then he shouted in the floor, started screaming a lot, all the tears, everything. And he started to shout to me, give me the tissue, you give me the tissue. And I was like, no, you have the tissue here. We are gonna have lunch. It's okay. Like you are really angry right now. Okay, I can see you're angry. And he was like, give me the tissue, you clean my face. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it, but I'm here. I'm here with you. Are you angry? Are you okay? Can I help you other way? Give me the tissue. So he spent like many minutes, like shouting and asking me to clean his face, to give him some water. And I just stayed calm by himself, but I didn't manage to see what's underneath all that anger. No, he had to empty his baggage, and suddenly he hugged me, but maybe half an hour later. So it took quite a while, and I didn't know if it was okay to keep him crying for so much time, or if it was better like making him feel calm and then give him the tissue or not. So there was like this, I didn't feel comfortable, and I wanted to ask you, like, what do I do when he starts to shout and ask me to do things that he can do by himself? No, so yes.
So, you know, this idea that we can't do things for kids that they can do themselves.
It depends on the moment.
It's misguided. It's misguided. I know that it comes from a positive place of helping children become resourceful, but think about it. Let's say you're overwhelmed. Let's say you're feeling sick. I just got off an airplane after a trip, first time I've been in an airplane in a long time. I'm a little sick today, right? So I can see by the end of the day, I'm going to be wiped. So let's say I just sink down on the couch and I say to my husband, "Oh, sweetheart, would you bring me the tissues? I need to blow my nose again. And would you bring me some water?" And let's say my husband says, "No, you can get it yourself."
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
Right? Of course I can get it myself. But, right? Now, if on a daily basis, your child says to you, "Get the tissues," and they're not dysregulated, they're not having a tantrum, they're not, they're just like ordering you around, that's a completely different thing, right? I don't say to my husband on a daily basis, "Go get me water, go get me tissues," right? There'd be something wrong if I did. And if your child acted like that, there's something wrong that your child is signaling to you, right? The reason people get, including children, controlling and demanding like that is the same reason they get provocative and throw things. And it's that they've got a full backpack and they're actually trying to start a fight, right? And they need a chance to let that stuff out. That's what's going on when someone acts like that. But that's not what happened with your child. What happened with your child is you said, "No, you can't do something that he really wanted to do." And he said, he tried to find a way out of it. He cried and cried. He was very upset, but he tried to save face. This is what happens with all of us, but especially strong-willed people. He tried to save face and find some way that he could reassert control in the situation because he was completely powerless. He wasn't able to do what he wanted. This person who is not only bigger and stronger, but the arbiter of all that's truth and justice and beauty in the world had just said to him, "No, sorry, we're having lunch, no ball." And he was totally powerless. So he was trying to assert at least a little power, right? And find a way that he wouldn't feel like he'd completely lost in the situation. Find a way that at least he felt like he got something he needed, right? Because remember, his well-being crashed at the moment that you said no ball. Somehow that was such a big threat to his well-being that he went into, well, fight mode, but then collapsed, right? He collapsed, right? But he was so angry and he was crying. He was all that feeling of powerlessness. What that leads me to believe, because this isn't the first time this has happened, is that he frequently feels powerless. And am I right that your 8-year-olds are two of them? They're twins?
Yeah, twins.
Yes. So he has two older sibs. So it's a busy household. There are two people who have more power than he does. And he, I think often, and maybe he has big needs, and he might often just feel like, "I don't get what I need. Nobody listens to me. It's always time to eat when I want to play with the ball," right? And he just felt overwhelmed. So at that moment, I think, is the wrong moment when someone's dysregulated to ask them to rise to the occasion, right?
Okay.
Rise to the occasion, meaning ask him to pull it together and go get his own tissues.
Mhm.
At that moment when he falls apart, you could say, "You're having such a hard time. You wish you could play with the ball. I see. And it's time to eat. Get me the tissues." And I would say, "You really want the tissues right now. It's so hard right now for you. I'm going to get you the tissues," which is, in fact, not a compromise at all on your part. I mean, he's just yelled at you. He's been rude. He's ordered you around. That's true. But you're going to deal with that later. You get the tissues and you bring them over. and you pet him and hold him and he cries a little more and he blows his nose and you say, I'm sorry, it's so hard. You really wished you could play with the ball. You can play a little later. I'm so glad you feel a little better. Let's go eat our delicious food. That's all. And then he comes with you more willingly at that point because he has felt at least cared about and like some of his needs get met. Maybe his need to play with the ball doesn't get met, but his bigger need to feel like he does matter. He's not insignificant. Because remember, that's the bigger need. It wasn't about playing with the ball. It was, I'm powerless here. My needs don't matter. So when you say your needs do matter, I'm bringing you the tissues. Then he felt like, oh, I'm not insignificant. I do matter. I don't always get what I want, but someone takes care of me.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
And I want to say, it's my job to tell people what they could do better, but I don't want you to walk away from this thinking, oh gosh, I blew it. Because actually, the other thing I want you to hear is, it's great otherwise to encourage him to do things for himself when he's not dysregulated. That's different. And through that whole long time, when you're trying to get lunch, going, and here he is crying on the floor and ordering you around and insulting you, you stayed calm. That's a big win. It's a big win. Not everybody could have done that. And I want you to take that with you too.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. Our next person was, I'm having to scroll back to
I think
see.
it was me.
Leslie.
Leslie.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi, Dr. Laura Markham. Thanks so much for taking my question. Mine is around kind of special time and rough housing. I'm having some challenges with my 7-year-old who is a gladiator, spirited, whatever you want to call those types of really strong-willed children. And he is very competitive, very kind of like structured activities. And it's for special time, he always wants to, play some really hard game or, read some really challenging book or make some complicated craft that, he's been dreaming of. Even with rough housing last night, we were trying to wrestle on the couch and I was, wrestling with all 4 of my kids at the same time. So trying to balance like what felt comfortable for the 3-year-old in terms of it not being too scary. And they wanted me to be an alligator on the floor and we're doing this whole thing. But my eldest son, Hudson, wants to introduce all these rules and the ways that you have to be and your feet can't move here and you have to do it this way. And it ends up that in our special time and in our rough housing, we're not laughing. We're like, it's like he's making it so structured that it ends up being challenging and creating kind of this other layer of tension between us. And I'm just wondering if you have thoughts about why that's happening and ideas on how to redirect him to some more appropriate ways for us to spend our time together and work through those big emotions that he is clearly carrying around.
So all we ever have is hypotheses, right? And we test them when we see if they're working out. So one hypothesis is that this is a kid who has real vision of the way things should be, right? And wants to master that thing, whatever it is, and throws himself at it wholeheartedly, but can't always pull it off. And that can be a frustrating thing. So that's why in special time, he's like, I want to do this hard thing. It could be it.
Yeah.
It's also possible that he has a full backpack. And in the same way that a kid will like look right at you and dump their juice on the floor, right? Or, throw a cucumber at their brother at the dinner table. There's a reason kids do this provocative stuff that they know is against the rules. They do it because they actually just need to cry, right? And so it's possible that that's going on and that he sets up an impossible task that he'll then fall apart on. I don't know which is true.
Both are probably a bit true, although he's also a child that is really resistant to crying. So what ends up happening when the perfect project that we're trying to make with the glue gun and the popsicle sticks isn't going the exact way that he wants it to, is then he's mad at me and, I don't even want to spend time with you anyway. And it's this whole angry outburst more than a beautiful teary connection.
So he sounds like a perfectionist.
Oh yeah.
Sounds like someone who doesn't like to be vulnerable or powerless or cry.
No.
And these things often go together. And it sounds like, he might well be setting these things up so he gets a chance to cry, but isn't doing it. And, he's already 7 and he's a boy. which makes it harder. Both things make it harder to cry. You know, if they're 4, it's easier usually.
Yeah.
Although there are many kids who by 4 are like, I will not cry no matter what. I would begin to work on vulnerability and safety around crying and opportunities to cry. What I have observed is that, one, you have to talk about crying in your house, not when anybody's upset. And how I cried today when such and such happened. You guys ever cry? Did you cry this week? Did you cry today? You know, just like make it a normal, okay thing that everybody cries sometimes, and make sure it's okay for boys to cry too. Everybody cries. Grown-up boys cry. Daddies cry. Everybody cries sometimes. And listen to them when they say, "Oh, but it's not really okay for boys to cry because blah, blah, blah." When Joey hurt himself at school and he cried, everyone made fun of him. And say, you know what, our society is a little unforgiving toward men. They don't let men have feelings. Isn't that terrible? But you can always cry at home. I mean, you're not telling them to cry in front of their friends and get teased, but you are making it a safe, we have a safe place to cry. So there's all of that conversation that's a really important thing to have happen. But the other thing is laughter. What I've noticed is that when kids can't cry, they're pretty tightly wound because they're holding all that stuff down. And what's being held down is not anger. Anger is what they do to keep the tears away, right? It's the warrior part, right? So when we can allow the stuff in the backpack to start to come out, then they can cry. But it doesn't start with tears because that's too threatening. It starts with fear, which is usually, you know, the top layer of stuff in the backpack is just mild anxiety, right? When I say top, it's not the deep stuff, right? And that can come out when you laugh. For all of us, when we laugh, it's a great off-putting of the top layer of stuff in the backpack. Basically, whatever stress hormones are circulating in your body right now, you get rid of them when you laugh. So that's actually a great thing to start with, because when those aren't in your body, you don't have to hang on quite so tight, and you don't necessarily go right into fight. You might soften a little first. So second thing is, a child like that needs to laugh a lot.
Yeah. And I think he knows that. Like, that's why, you know, after dinner, he's like, can we wrestle now? Can we wrestle now? Let's wrestle. And then when we start wrestling, he's like, okay, you can't do this and you have to do this. And like,
So
it gets
first
into
of
this
all,
drill sergeant.
Roughhousing with the other kids, because roughhousing, you often have more than one child. So roughhousing with the other kids, he's not in charge of the rules. He's in charge of special time, but he's not in charge of roughhousing, right? So roughhousing, you can make a rule. When we roughhouse, what are the rules that we do together? Everybody has to agree on what we're doing. And when anybody says stop, we stop. Those are the two most important rules, right? And no hitting, or no, you know, if you're wrestling and, you know, no hitting in the face, or, you know, there's definitely got to be some rules that everyone agrees to.
Yeah. And that's partly why I want to roughhouse with him, is because he's also struggling even at school to learn boundaries and not being too rough in a game and all this kind of stuff. So we're working through all of that in roughhousing, and he has to be playing in a way that's safe for his 3-year-old brother. And
yes,
you know,
so if
all of that.
the 3-year-old, he's not in charge of the roughhousing, and you're very clear about that. No, we roughhouse in a way that's safe for everybody. You can do separate roughhousing with him at times when the 3-year-old is otherwise occupied, but when you're roughhousing with a 3-year-old, he doesn't make the rules, and he might find that frustrating.
Yeah, he says things like, well, then it's boring.
And
you know, it's not a 7-year-old game.
Okay, and that's probably true. It's hard for a 7-year-old and a 3, but you can figure out things that get them both laughing, probably, where they have different roles in the roughhousing.
Yeah, or I tried to do your idea of like, I bet you can't get my socks off, like those types of just like, you know, fun, silly games like that. And he sometimes can get into that. So
yeah, and pushing across the room.
Yeah, he loves that. He'd do that with me all day long.
So I think really focus on the laughter, talk about the tears. And I would also start to talk about perfectionism and mistakes and aspirations and mastery. It's an ongoing thing for most oldest children. Oldest children notoriously are perfectionists because, well, there's one thing that is just natural. They're the oldest kid, and so they're the first one in the family that hits it, and they assume they have to know how to do it, whereas the kid coming up behind them assumes the 7-year-old knows, but I don't know because I'm little, you know. But also we as parents often don't understand that when we have them demonstrate how great they are, we tell them, oh, you're so smart or whatever, that they feel this is pressure. And so it turns into perfectionism often. And we have to be really careful about that. Not, you know.
Would you still do this very structured activities that he's asking to do during special time?
I think you should do it every other day. He should decide every other day, and you should decide. That way it doesn't take up all of your special time. And if he gets upset during special time because his elaborate craft project with the glue gun doesn't work, you can say, okay, we're going to take a deep breath. This is so frustrating. You help him through his feelings. And if he's angry that you didn't hold the gun right, the glue gun right or whatever, right? You can say, it is so upsetting when it goes wrong and you feel like I did it wrong because it didn't go right. Sometimes things don't go right and it's so hard, isn't it? You're speaking to the feelings that are under his anger.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay. And our next person is Pata.
Hi, Dr. Laura. So excited. Thank you so much. And also, you are super patient. Okay, my question today is, what is your most important key for raising, okay, let's see if I say this word right, resilience. Resilience. Yeah, I read your blogs about the secret of raising a resilience. I read that, and also I want to go a little deeper because it's also when I start study you, I also use it with myself. I don't have children, but I'm a teacher. I have my student coming in part-time right now. But I do look up the words in Thai language because I'm from Thailand, right? But it's only mean flexible. It's just not. I don't think, and I heard you say it all the time. And one day it clicked me so much when I went to scuba diving when I'm super beginner swimming, and I got super fear. And I kind of didn't go through the whole, went scuba dive, but I didn't go through the whole thing. Instead of 30 minutes, I did 10 minutes and got freaked out. Then I want to come up. So I applied for a scuba diving lesson. So I just every time I do something out of my comfort zone or, trying to do that, I think of my student or my students who I share what I learned from you and what works. And then I share some time with Thai parents, and I related so much. And I wanted to ask from you, I mostly work with 0 to 3, what practical way or what's the most important key for raising resilient, Yeah.
Okay, so let's start by defining resilience.
Yeah.
So what I mean by resilience, and I think what is meant when people talk to it, is life throws a lot of stuff at us and you never know what you're going to get. So if you can handle what life throws at you, and sometimes you can stay in a good mood, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're just overwhelmed and you put yourself to bed and you try again the next day. But resilience is about saying, this is hard for me at this moment, but I can handle it, or I can take good care of me and I can come back and try it again later, another time. That's what resilience is, okay? So what makes things hard for us? Well, life throws a lot of stuff at us, right? But some people fall apart pretty quickly, and some people, nothing seems to throw them. Well, those people are really lucky, right? They're lucky. Most of us, when life throws stuff at us, are we catch as much as we can. And at some point we're just I'm overwhelmed, right? And we fall apart. And again, we feel that as a threat. Our nervous system takes that in as a threat, right? There's too much coming at me. I can't keep up with all this. I'm overwhelmed. The demands from outside are overwhelming the resources I have inside. So you're not resilient if the demands from outside are overwhelming your inner resources. So the most important thing to do to raise children who are resilient, to foster resilience, or even to be resilient ourselves, is to increase the inner resources. Now, sometimes we can change the environment. Sometimes for our children, for instance, we can not, ask too much of them when they're already upset, right? When we know they're struggling with their homework, we might give them extra support at that time. That's an outside resource change, right? They're struggling with their homework, but we're giving them extra resource by sitting with them as they do it. Or if it's a 3-year-old who's upset because somebody keeps grabbing toys out of her hands and she starts to grab the other kids to bite them, right? She's feeling overwhelmed. She's not resilient in the face of people grabbing her toys. She needs to learn how to use her words to stand up for herself in an okay manner, right? Without biting the other kids. So what do? we can increase her inner resources, give her the words, and we can also, as her teacher or her parent, give her more outer resources. We can be her backup. We can say, you don't like it when they take your toys. You can say no, and you can call me, and you know, whatever she calls you, she can now call you to come and help her, right? If she knows she has backup, she's less likely to bite. Then she's not as threatened, right? So always with resilience, what we want to do is we want to increase the outer resource we're giving to the child or to ourselves. And also we want to increase the inner resource. And inner resource I mentioned with a 3-year-old, you might help her learn the words to say, what she can say to stick up for herself, right? And you also can, you know, for kids, you say 0 to 3, giving them the resource, it's always a matter. Remember, their prefrontal cortex is just developing. They don't have the inner resource to calm down and help themselves feel safe, right? So you're always restoring safety. That makes it that when you're restoring safety, if a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 1-year-old is upset, you're helping them feel safe. You're hugging them. You're saying, it's okay. I've got you. You're safe. I'm right here. We're going to solve this, just so that they feel somebody's there and listening and has their back. That's the most important thing you can do for a little one. Secure attachment to the parent. But remember, kids can have a secure attachment to a teacher as well. What creates a secure attachment is if they feel like that grown-up is going to respond to their needs. So if you take care of them and respond to their needs, that is the #1 way to promote resilience in those kids as they grow up, is that they feel somebody's there to watch out for them. And even if you only have those kids with you for a year, if they go on to a different teacher, they'll have had that good experience. They'll expect that teacher to have their back. They'll trust that teacher, and they're more likely to bring that out in that teacher. The teacher's more likely to respond to them in a responsive manner, right? So that's, again, is super important.
Thank you. And so this is inner resources. What about outer? If you could give me a couple.
Well, an outer resource would be if you're her backup. If you go over to her when she's trying to bite somebody or someone's trying to take the toy from her, that would be an example of an outer resource. Another example of an outer resource would be if a child always has a hard time saying goodbye to their parent in the morning when their parent drops them off. If they know that you're going to hold them and take care of them. And, you know, if they know that they have, you know, that a routine in the morning with you, that the parent says goodbye, but you always hug them. And then you always take them over to do something with you, where the two of you do something together. And that's their job every morning, is to help you do something. Then they know that they have a job, but also that you're with them and can help them through those feelings. That's an outer resource.
I love it. Do you have any more resource I can read more or listen more about this topic in your blog or?
I think there's a lot on resilience on the website if you just put the search term resilience in.
Okay.
We're going to be doing a spotlight on resilience again. So watch for the spotlight early in the new year. I should add that we're finishing our anger spotlight now, and we have a couple more audios to do. Someone asked me for an audio for kids to help them calm down. So I'm going to create that. And there'll be a little caveat, which I'll talk more about when I give that to you, which is don't force that on an angry child. You know, do it when they're not angry so that they end up liking it and getting used to it. And then they can choose. And you can say, I'm going to use this to calm down when I'm upset. You can use it to calm down when you're upset. So if you choose to. So you're not, because no one wants, when we're angry, we want to feel heard. We don't want to be sent off to listen to something because we're being bad and wrong by having those angry feelings, right? So we're not going to shame and blame kids. But anyway, that's not related to your question, although it does relate to resilience, because when kids feel heard and then they learn the tools to help themselves through their big feelings, that's an inner resource that's so important. We give them the outer resource, let's say, of this audio, and they learn to use it and find it helps them. Or they have a calm down corner that helps them. Anything that helps kids with their emotions builds resilience, because then they're not so much at the mercy of their emotions.
But also, like you said at the beginning, that it's also help that we also resilient ourselves. And that's the way we could do it, is kind of like calm our brain and kind of just the same thing you told me to do with the kids, but I'll do it my brain, right? Because I've been doing it to my brain too. And
So remember, the kind of parenting I'm recommending has 3 big ideas. We calm ourselves, which you just said.
mhm,
We connect with the child so they don't feel so alone, so they feel we've got their back.
mhm.
And third, we coach them to help them to do all kinds of things. We set up the environment so they can thrive,
Yeah.
right? We make sure they don't have too much screen time, they get enough food at the right times, they go to
Yeah.
bed at a reasonable hour. So we set up the environment, right? Um,
Papa?
And so I'm going to mute you, Lubna. Okay. So we're doing those 3 things, right? We're self-regulating, we're connecting, and we're coaching. And coaching is also emotion coaching. Emotion coaching is being with kids with their emotions. And it's also helping kids, once they're calm, not while they're upset,
Yeah.
find ways to work with their emotions. Because we're not trying to keep a kid from getting angry. We're trying to, no one will ever, I mean, no human being is going to ever not get angry.
Yeah.
What we're trying to do is give them a different relationship with their anger so that they don't get hijacked by it, right? We're trying to do that for ourselves as well. So we're role modeling. That's part of coaching in a way. So all of these things, these 3 things I just mentioned, raise resilient children. Anything that creates an emotionally intelligent child creates a resilient child. So basically, I would say every single thing I teach on the 1,000-page website and all the books, in the course, in the membership, everything is going to raise children who are more resilient.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, so I know we have a pre-submitted question. I wonder if we should do that first, Candace. What do you think?
Absolutely. And actually, do we have time? We have a time restraint on 1 member.
Okay, so we could do that first. Do you want to do that
And
first?
yes, if we'll do Lauren and then pre-submitted and see how we are. Does that
Okay.
work for you?
That's perfect. Lauren, if you can unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you. Just firstly, I'd love to say thank you so much for taking my question. Sorry, I'm in a bit of a rush. And thanks also to everybody who's given me some really great advice on the chat about sensory issues. That's not what I'm talking about today, but it's really helpful. And I love the chat function and the support of this group. So my question was actually about just what you were just talking about, parental self-regulation. So I have ADHD. I'm fairly sure my daughter has ADHD. And as a result, I really, really struggle to emotionally regulate. And I've had a couple of years of therapy. I've now started body psychotherapy to try and sort of heal some of the deeper stuff, go right into my childhood. But I still find myself getting incredibly triggered. And on an average day, you know, because my child is incredibly angry and aggressive all of the time. So she's got a very full backpack. She's got lots and lots of issues. I'm trying to get her a diagnosis for ADHD, and I think she's got sensory issues as well and struggles with school. So, you know, she's five and a half, and we have probably 5 to 10 meltdowns a day, and they're, you know, her kicking and screaming and shouting and hitting us and hitting her sister and hitting the cat and throwing things. And, you know, I try and remain calm and empathetic, and I think I'm successful in that 80% of the time. But because it's just so relentless, I just don't seem to be able to stay calm all of the time. And so inevitably, I end up shouting at her, and my husband ends up shouting at her at least once a day. And I'm wondering what impact that has, and whether this can, you know, obviously I don't want to give up on this kind of parenting. I'm passionate about it, but I'm worried that I can't do it. I don't know. I mean, I listen to your inspirations every day, and that really helps. And I try and do longer meditations when I can, and yoga. But I can't seem to keep it together all the time. And I didn't know if you had any advice.
Lauren, you're not alone, first of all. It's, you know, when you are biologically predisposed to have a harder time self-regulating, which is what ADHD does, it it's not just about attention. It's not just about hyperactivity. It's also about impulse control
Mm.
and self-regulation and self-discipline. It's very hard to, the things that somebody else might find easier, you're going to find twice as hard about impulse control and self-regulation. That's just the way it is. And then the problem with that is you're already your age now. And so you went through your whole life with this and struggling with this. And so you accumulated a lot of baggage. So you also have to work through that baggage and do that healing. So you're trying to rewire your brain and you're trying to do that healing, right? And you have a child who's very provocative and difficult. And she's provocative and difficult, partly biologically, and probably partly because she grew up with someone who was having a hard time self-regulating, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean when you say you don't want to give up on this kind of parenting, I don't think any other kind of parenting would work better.
No, I know, I don't either.
So
No.
I think we could instead say, well, when something's not working with our child, when they're not meeting our expectations, what do? We could give up on this kind of parenting and we could start threatening, or we could give the child more support. So we want to give the daughter more support. We also need to apply this to ourselves. You need more support. So what you're describing is you have a really hard time self-regulating. You've worked super hard at it. You're only blowing up at your kid once a day most of the time. That's already improvement from what you were doing before.
Yeah.
It is. It's improvement. You should give yourself that. It's improvement. Yeah. It took some hard work to get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do actually more if you keep doing what worked for you. And the way to do it is not to beat yourself up. That never helps. The only way to do it is to give yourself more support. So you have a checklist or a chart that you use to organize yourself so that you take care of you so you can stay on track?
No.
I'm going to say, start a chart tonight that you check off. And the chart's something like, every morning when I get up, here's how I start off on the right foot. Maybe you get up earlier than your kid does, so you're in a calmer mood. Maybe you listen to a little guided meditation, even a little 4-minute one. Maybe you work out, right? There are lots of things that work in different.
My kids get up at 5:30.
Oh, no.
I start working at 7.
But you do need to get organized the night before, because otherwise you start the day your kids already create a sense of threat, right? Because they're not regulated necessarily in the morning. And then on top of that, if your house is chaotic and you don't have things organized and you're running around, then that's a threat. So you're going to lose it no matter what, right? So what I have seen work for, so I'm working with a mom right now who has definitely, to me, looks like she has attention issues. And working with the chart really helps. And she has to constantly reaffirm, okay, I'm going to go back to using the chart. But when she does it, she does something to get centered first thing in the morning. And yes, her kids, wake up early too. So, and she has a baby, so she's not necessarily getting up before then, but she tries to be organized the night before. And then once the kids are off to school, she sits down with the baby and she does a little guided meditation herself, right? She makes sure she goes for a walk a little bit after that, so like there's a whole set of she does. She stops, puts away her phone, because otherwise the phone is always there as a beacon. And so she puts away the phone when her kids get home from school later, so she can do some rough housing with them, which really makes them behave better. But she's got her whole, like, she does a meditation. She does some kind of a physical activity, workout, and then the other thing is just to notice your thoughts.
Yeah. So I would say I'm doing all of that stuff. So I do have quite haven't got it written down, but I have quite a strict routine.
It works for you.
That's
fantastic. Yeah. You don't need to write it down. But then you're noticing your thoughts means the minute you have a negative thought, and this is the hardest thing in the world. This is a lifetime practice, but it will change your life if you do this. Notice the thought. The minute you see a thought in there that's negative, you stop and you notice it. Now, if you notice the negative feeling first, there was a thought that preceded it, but you missed it. But like, let's say you have a sense of dread. Before your daughter comes home from school, you might have a sense of dread, let's say, right? That's a feeling that's coming from some thought, some conclusion, and the thought might be, she's going to come home and it's going to be overwhelming. I'm not going to know what to do, and I'm going to get overwhelmed and I'm going to yell at her, right? And you can stop and you can say, you know what, wouldn't it be nice if that didn't happen? Wouldn't it be nice if I could preempt that by doing a little roughhousing and connecting with her? Wouldn't it be nice if she actually had a good day at school today and it was remarkable and miraculous, but it, was okay? Wouldn't it be nice if I could give myself just a few minutes with a cup of tea by myself right now? So when she does come home, I have more inner resources, right? So just to notice the thoughts and to ask yourself what you need at that moment to feel better about it, to have a different thought going into it, a more positive thought, because the thoughts
Okay.
create feelings, right? That's what mindfulness is. Mindfulness isn't even about changing the thought, which I just did. Mindfulness is about noticing the feeling the feeling. It's okay to feel the dread, noticing the thought. And here's the thing about the dread. It's not permanent. What happens is as you sit there and you feel the dread, don't get into a big story about it. Just notice, oh, it feels like a pit in my stomach. Oh, it feels like my heart is so heavy. I feel like I want to cry. Suddenly it's not dread anymore, it's grief, right? That's what happens. The minute you feel a feeling, feelings are morphing all the time. The minute we pay attention, we got the message about the dread. We don't need that anymore. Now it's to something behind the dread, the grief. The grief is, oh my gosh, is it going to be like this forever? How did I get a child that's this hard? How can I not be a better mother? Did I ruin her? I mean, all the stuff that goes on in our mind that causes that grief. And you sit with the grief a little bit, and that changes too, right? And we learn we can handle it. It gives us a little bit of space. The observer self notices, and it gives us a little space to not get hijacked by either the dread or the grief. And then we can do something nice for ourselves and notice the cascade of thoughts that got us to here, and choose a thought that's going to actually take us to a more positive place, which is, listen, I only blow up at her once a day. I'm getting better. I'm sooner or later, it's going to be 2 days before, in between. Sooner or later, it'll be 3 days. I'm on the right track. I've got to take care of me to get there. So this is like clawing your way at equilibrium, but it does work. And I have to say, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of parents do it, and you can do it too.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Okay, you're welcome. So Candace, is this the time to answer our pre-submitted question?
I think so. Thank you so much for answering that question for Lauren. Yes, would you?
Yes, I will. So I want to say just about pre-submitted questions, we do have people for whom it does not work to come because of their location in the world or the time zone or whatever. So we do take never more than 3, and usually more like 1 or 2 pre-submitting questions every time. And it's so great, the timing of this, because the question we just had leads right into this. It's from a mom whose daughter is 10 and has been diagnosed with ADHD. And she's also been diagnosed with ODD, and ODD is oppositional defiant disorder. And usually what ODD, the way I read ODD, is that this is a child who's in a constant state of threat, and therefore they react angrily. They go into fight all the time because they're so threatened. And obviously that can be a problem if they're, not responding well to what parents are saying. Conventional parents are often told, you're just not being hard enough on them. And then when parents are hard on them, that kind of conventional parenting just blows up in their face. The child feels less safe and goes into fight mode more. I'm not saying that's what this mom is doing, by the way. I was just explaining ODD. This mom has been doing this kind of parenting for a while, and I think probably is not parenting with conventional parenting, and said that things were going pretty well. But her daughter has lately started acting out like crazy, coming home from school crying, tormenting her little brother, wetting the bed at night, screaming at the mom and dad, getting failing grades at school. Something has just fallen out of the bottom of this 10-year-old's life, clearly, recently, to cause all this behavior. And, she's a child who feels under threat a lot, we know, and a child who has a hard time with self-regulation, we know also, because we just talked about ADD and ADHD. So it turns out, this mom said in her note to me, that what happens is that she gets into fights at school and they escalate. And it's hard to tell what's really going on because her daughter isn't necessarily a reliable reporter. Remember, she feels under threat. She feels the other kids are wrong. But the principal of the school says, she's rude to the other kids. She gets aggressive with the other kids. So clearly these issues of feeling under threat and having impulse control issues are getting in her way of her peer relationships. So this mom wrote to me that she's done a lot of connecting with her daughter, which is great. She listed all these things that she's done to connect with her daughter, and that's great. She says that her partner, the dad, wants to crack down with threats to the daughter to get her to behave, and that she's doesn't think that's going to help anything. So what we know about this child is that she's dysregulated because she is feeling threat. So when we start threatening her, she's going to feel more threat. So I guarantee you it will not work. She's already wetting the bed. She's 10 years old. So clearly something is not working for her. If we start threatening her, she's going to feel like her backup at home is gone, and you erode the connection you just worked so hard to create. So it's definitely not the right answer. We know she's behaving badly because she's dysregulated. So the first thing I would say is preventive maintenance every single day. Every kid needs it. A kid who's having a hard time needs it a lot more. So remember, preventive maintenance includes connection, includes special time. But special time is also a way that kids work out their issues. People are being mean to them at school, or they're having fights at school. They start to work that out in special time. Also, remember, special time is about laughter. Kids who are high-strung, kids who are feeling like they're under threat are high-strung. They have a lot of fear and anxiety. So getting them laughing is super important every single day. Kids like this often have a hard time laughing. We talked about that earlier in relation to another child. So super important to do the daily laughter as well as daily special time. Another thing is kids who feel under threat need routines. This child may have routines. I'm just reviewing what preventive maintenance would look like. Routines are really important for preventive maintenance, and also, of course, include connection, right? Empathy. When kids are often at odds with the world, they need parents more than ever to affirm their feelings. Even when you're setting a limit, even when she was just mean to her little brother, of course you take care of the little brother first. The 3-year-old needs your comfort. And then you say, it looks like you were really upset at your brother because he kept screaming and that really irritated you. I see that. It is hard when he screams, and he's only 3. So you're saying she can't be mean to her brother. You tell her that, but also you're acknowledging that that was a hard thing for her to handle. So she is getting empathized with, even when you're setting limits. That's the 4th preventive maintenance, in no particular order. And the 5th one is allowing feelings. So this is a kid who needs some serious crying. The more you do the other 4 things, the more she's going to be likely to cry. And that will really help her go to school and not be quite so wound up. So she'll have more inner resources to deal with her friends. But preventive maintenance won't be enough because she needs to learn some skills. She's already 10 and she's having a very hard time with her emotions. She needs to learn some skills. So I would start with using the connection you've worked so hard to build to teach her more about how the mind works. Why is she going into anger? Use the spotlight we've been doing about how anger works. She's 10. She could probably listen to all of the audios, not just the stuff that was designed for kids or the printables designed for kids. She could also hear the whole thing. Help her notice how often her mind goes into threat and how maybe there wasn't actually a threat there. She just saw one there. And you can talk about it in interactions at home, but the more connection she has with you, the more she'll be willing to share with you what happened at school. Now, she might say, my friend says she won't be my friend anymore. It was all her fault. I didn't do anything wrong. And that's fine. She can blow off steam and you can listen. And you can say, no wonder you're so upset. It really didn't go the way you wanted. And once she's gotten it all off her chest, not before that, once she's calmed down, you can also say something like, I wonder what your friend thought of the interaction. I wonder how it was for her. I wonder if she had a different way of looking at it. I wonder if she was angry too. I wonder if she was upset too. I wonder if she felt afraid or hurt. But you never do that until the child has really had a chance to work through the upset. It may be in a different conversation, right? But you're helping her, you're coaching her to learn how anger works, which is that we're in fight mode and we're trying to demolish our enemy, but actually that's our good friend and she saw things completely differently. So that kind of coaching is an important part of every child's upbringing. But when kids have a hard time with self-regulation, it's even more important. But remember, we're not lecturing them. we want to, I mean, my whole mission in life is to teach people how this stuff works. But in fact, we have to ask a lot of questions and do a lot of listening so that they can learn these things. Because if we just start lecturing, they turn off. We have to first always listen and then be available to help them pull back the camera and broaden their perspective so they can see things from another perspective. But first they have to be with the feelings. And remember, for them, once we listen to the anger, what's under that anger will be other feelings. It'll be, I love my friend. I'm going to miss her so much. And I did say mean things to her, and I'm so sorry about that. I regret it. The anger will begin to change and morph, because that's what feelings do when we sit with them. So our ability to tolerate our child's emotions, to sit with them and to listen when they're expressing the hard things that they're feeling, that's super important. And it's important that we're giving them the message that feelings aren't dangerous. We always can choose what to do with the feelings. Right now, your anger seems dangerous to you because you lashed out and you told your friend you didn't want to be your friend anymore, or whatever happened. But the more we learn to sit with our anger and tolerate it and notice it and let it wash over us without taking action and let it pass away, the more we notice what's under the anger. And the more we notice what's under it, the more we have a chance to work through those things. And the less anger we have, and also the less of those other things, the vulnerability, vulnerability in the sense of powerlessness, the feelings of fear and sadness and hurt and powerlessness that make us feel so vulnerable. Being vulnerable is actually okay, but we don't like how that feels because we don't feel safe. So the more we help kids understand that we can tolerate their feelings, it goes back to the lovely question we had about resilience and how to raise resilient kids. The more we can be with our kids' feelings, the more they become comfortable with those feelings, and the more they learn to manage them. So that's the answer to that question. So we try to, we say an hour, but then we always go an hour and a half, but we're past our time. I know we didn't get to all of our questions today. I could do one more question, Candace, if you know whose hand went up first. I know we have more than one, but maybe we can just do one more.
Absolutely. I have someone who's never asked before, Dasha.
Okay, Dasha, if you could unmute yourself, please.
I hope it's okay that I actually have asked the question before.
Okay.
So
I
still want to
apologize.
take my question?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So my question is a little similar to the one you just answered, but it relates more to how to handle teachers who do not understand that when a child is quote unquote misbehaving, they don't actually mean to be misbehaving. They're in fight or flight. So I have a 5.5-year-old son who has a sensory processing disorder and dyspraxia, suspected ADHD. And so I do a lot of the type of parenting that you teach at home, and he's very responsive to it. I can see that it's making a difference, but I'm having trouble communicating those techniques and approaches to the school. And the school has more of a traditional view of he's misbehaving, it's quote unquote bad behavior. So we're going to give him consequences. And so he keeps having this problem where he does something impulsively because he has no self-control. A lot of the times he feels threatened by things. He has issues with social skills. So he's in a classroom of 20 kids at a Montessori school. And so sometimes he has trouble, joining other kids in their play, or knowing how to properly join in a game, or, just even talk to friends. And so he will do something obnoxious. He'll rip a toy out of their hand. He just took a shoe off of a kid and threw it across the fence. He'll do something that is viewed as bad behavior by the teachers, when in fact it's a poor attempt at making friends and joining his peers. And so their response typically is he loses outdoor time. And he really needs outdoor time because being outdoors and running is actually helps him regulate his body and his nervous system. And so when I go to them and I try to explain it, they put it back on me, saying, almost like making me feel guilty that I don't give him enough consequences at home. And so they do my parenting for me at school.
Okay, so first of all, it may be necessary to change schools. This is not usually what Montessori schools do.
Exactly, which is why I chose the Montessori school. So it's just mind-boggling to me.
I have seen a range of Montessoris, you know. I've seen them where I was sort of shocked that they were Montessoris because they act like this. I've seen that before. But most Montessoris, I speak at a lot of Montessori schools. Most of them don't act like you're describing. So that's the first thing to know. Second thing to know is to get them a copy of Mona Delahook's book. She has a new one that's going to be coming out soon. I just read it, the advanced copy, and wrote a blurb for her. It's very good. It's for parents. And it's very much stuff that we're all always saying here. But the prior book she wrote, which is, I think, Beyond Behaviors, is
I have a copy of that.
Give them a gift of the book and explain to them that she works in schools and she says these kids are doing the best they can to self-regulate. And we're not just, and now here's the next thing that's important. And this is not necessarily Mona speaking, this is me speaking, but you should say this to them. We obviously need to protect the other children. I don't want my son wrenching a toy away from someone else. I don't want my son grabbing the shoe off another child and throwing it. Of course, he can't do these things. Of course, he gets dysregulated and we need to set limits about this. And when this happens, he needs help from an adult who will go in and say, whoa, 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 you are very upset. You can't take someone's shoe off. Let's calm down and then let's figure out what we can do to make this better. And you should say, we always do repairs. He doesn't even associate being kept inside. They're just doing that because it's easier for them, right? He doesn't associate being kept inside with what he did to the other kid. What he needs is something to make things better with the other kid. He needs to calm down first with the help of an adult and then go to the child and say, I'm really sorry I took your shoe off and threw it. I'm really sorry I did that. I was mad and I forgot to use my words. This is what you have to play act with him at home and do little scenarios so he learns to use this language. And you can have him do like play pretend, right? And you can be the bad kid. He can be the teacher and you can be the bad kid who lets the dragon, you know, rampage through the school and then says, I'm sorry I let the dragon out, you know, or whatever, right? Get him laughing about what the bad things this kid did. I'm sorry I flushed all the homework. He's at Montessori, so he's little, but I flushed it, all the things down, the manipulatives down the toilet. Whatever will get him laughing, right, is the point. And play with him, play act with him, how a kid does these bad things, and then, you know, does a repair. But make sure you're getting him laughing, because laughing is what takes the sting out of all this for him. Otherwise, he'll get that you're trying to teach him a lesson. You're instead trying to reduce, you are teaching him a lesson, but you're reducing the sting of all this, the anxiety that he feels around being the bad kid at school. And you also were saying to him, is it okay to let the dragon out? No. Is it okay to take a kid's glove off their hand and throw it? No. Is it okay to take a toy someone's using and be, you know, away from them? Is, you know, no. But what could we do instead? What could we do? You know, use your words. You're teaching him the skills to use by acting it out at home. They're clearly not doing it at school. So you're doing that at home. That's one thing you're doing. And the other thing you're doing is you're teaching him how to come back from those misbehaviors, quote unquote. You're teaching him that everybody gets dysregulated sometimes. And it's not the way we want to be with other people. And other people deserve our respect and our affection and our friendliness. And when we treat them in ways that are not ways we'd want to be treated, we come later and we make a repair as soon as we feel better enough to do it, right? So if he's learning those two things from you at home, he's more likely to do them in school, and you can tell them that's what you're teaching him, right? And that concept of repair is so important. The reason I suggested Delahook's book is just that she talks to schools about that kids are doing the best they can and that they need an adult to help them self-regulate. She introduces that concept to schools. So it's not like we don't know that here, but schools often don't know it. So, that's why I'd say to give the book to them.
Right. And do you think it would, I was thinking about giving that book because I have a copy, for myself, but I was thinking about giving it to them for Christmas, and then as it is, I feel like they're treating me a little bit like the squeaky wheel that doesn't get what they're trying to tell me, because they keep coming back to me. You have to give him more consequences. And I keep going back to them saying, no, you have to lend your calm nervous system to my son when he's in fight or flight.
Well, I think there's a better way to have that conversation, Dasha. I think when they say he needs more consequences from you at home, you can say, I am so supportive of your goal at school. There's no way I want my son to be acting this way. Taking kids' shoes off and throwing them, wrenching toys out of other kids' hands. He has sensory issues. He has ADHD, he has dyspraxia, he struggles with all these things. He's doing the best he can and he gets dysregulated easily. But I'm with you 100%. We are not wanting our son to act this way. And when he comes home, we talk about different ways he could act. And we're acting out scenarios at home of other ways he could choose to act in these situations. And also, the consequence you want, well, the consequence is obvious. The other kids won't like him. And so what I ask him to do is make things better. So you're not saying it's not really a consequence. You're not fighting about the word. You're just saying, yeah. I do that. Every time you say there's an issue at school, we talk at home every time about how he felt and how hard it was for him and what he could have done differently before it got out of hand and what he could do to make a repair afterwards. We're working on this so hard at home. See, if you just go in and you say, no, I don't believe in consequences. It's not squeaky wheel. They're going to be like, well, she's the recalcitrant mom who doesn't even believe her kids do anything wrong and isn't giving protection to the other kids. And we don't want that kid around. She never sees her son is doing anything wrong. That's not the approach you want to take. Your approach has to be, I'm in agreement with you. He can't do these things. And every day, whether you report something bad or not, we're working at home on these things. We act them out. We do laughter around them. We do different things he could have done. We talk about repairs. What would be so helpful is if you at school could, instead of keeping him in, which makes him dysregulate more, if you could support him to regulate at those moments when he's upset, and then to come back from that by making a repair with the other children. That would absolutely help him to control himself better. And what teachers think of kids is so important, you say to them, and it's true. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you see him as he can't self-regulate and you keep him in, he's going to regulate worse. Whereas if you help him to regulate and then you help him to make a repair, he's going to see himself. He's not so bad that he's outside the bonds of your community. He's able to find his way back into the relationship in the community to be a good citizen. And that's what we want all our children to learn.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good luck. Okay. So we're going to bring the call to a close. I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions. That does happen. But next time, if you still have a question, bring it. And also remember, you can always bring it up in the Facebook group, and there's lots of great information there. And remember, there are 2 Facebook groups you have access to. You also have the big Facebook group from the course. And then you have the membership one, which is much more intimate. So you can do it in both and see what kinds of answers you get. But I do encourage you to use the membership Facebook group, which is such a lovely, supportive group. It's the same people who are on this call today and on the chat. And I want to thank you again for your wonderful questions and your wonderful support for each other. The chat will be, I'm going to keep the chat and I will post it along with the video and the audio of this call so that if you want to download it and look for resources or anything, you'll have that as well. And thank you for the hard work you're doing every day in your homes and for bringing your great questions and for being part of this membership. And I will see you next month, a little bit after Hanukkah and before Christmas. We'll squeeze it in there. All right. Take care, everybody. Oh, unmute yourself and say goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody.
Everybody, thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.